Finances and Fiancés, where we're preparing your money for marriage. I am your host, Serene Nunes, your faith based certified financial coach. Welcome to the very episode of Finances and Fiancés. And I want to thank everybody who's watching the rebroadcast later. So, welcome. On every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, morning in the morning, I am going to be talking about preparing your money for marriage, finances and fiancés, because you're gonna have to, right? So um it's kind of time to start there. So there's been a lot of prophetic words that have been going on about kingdom marriages and things like that, but we know the facts are the facts, but the truth is the truth. So the fact is that a lot of marriages are, no, people don't get married to get divorced, right? But one of the underlying factors in marriage, I'm sorry, my house is just waking up. If you can hear the background noise, I apologize. I think I'm gonna have to do this an hour later after everybody has woken up. But I think I'm gonna do it at 10 o'clock. So be on the lookout for a time switch at 10 instead of 9. So here's the thing, and the facts tell us that most marriages break up for several reasons, but most of them break up between infidelity or sex outside of marriage, adultery, or money, right? And here's the thing, money is an inanimate object like a pen or a fork. It can't really do anything unless you put it in the hand. So um, money is the same way. It is an inanimate object, but most of us don't treat it like an inanimate object. We allow it to reign and rule our lives, right? So it governs our emotions a lot. You will find that over time as we go through different episodes and series, right? So, and a lot of us are uncomfortable with the conversation of money as well. So go back to my original point. So money itself doesn't destroy the marriage, can destroy a marriage. And I'm not saying you're getting married to be destroyed, but money, how you feel about money, how you handle money, how you do stuff with money will definitely have an impact on your life when it comes to money, right? And it will definitely have an impact on your marriage when it comes to money, right? So your emotional health, your soul, your heart, mind, will, and emotions are all going to be impacted by this thing called money, right? And so will your marriage. But what if there was a way for you to head off this disaster? What if it's a way that you can start preparing your money for marriage before you get married? And this is what these Saturday live streams are always going to be about, right? For the whole year of 2022, I'm going to be dedicating my Saturday mornings to talking to you guys about preparing your money for marriage, right? Finances and fiancés, what to do in the dating stage, how to ask the question, how to make yourself comfortable in talking about money, things like that, right? So that was today's episode is all about. It is about finances and fiancés, right? It's about finances and fiancés, right? How to prepare your money for marriage or preparing your money for marriage. So today's episode, I'm going to give you 5 questions you can ask. And here's the thing about asking questions. So we'll get into that. 5 questions you're going to be asking and how to talk about money without talking about money, right? So you meet a person and you and this person, y'all got great chemistry together. And no, let me back this up. I can almost guarantee you that if you talk to a married couple who's been together a while, and they'll tell you that um if there was something that's bothering them about that person in their marriage, right? Usually that behavior was always there. They just never like dealt with it, right? They just ignored it, or they turned a blind eye to it. We do that all the time. We'll see a behavior in somebody that we really like, but we know that behavior is not good for us or them, or conducive for us or them. So what we do is we kind of turn a blind eye to it until that behavior gets on your nerves, right? But the behavior didn't magically show up. It was always there, right? Same thing with money. If you are married and you're in a relationship with someone right now, like you're engaged to someone and they have issues with money, that issue didn't show up because y'all got engaged. The issue was already there but you choose to ignore it, which is which is good and bad, right? It's not good that you ignored the thing, but you have to understand why you ignored the issue to begin with. I gotta soften this light up a little bit. You gotta figure out why the issue is there, right? You gotta figure out why you ignored that issue, right? And maybe it's because in the beginning you were caught up in chemistry and not character, as someone else I know would say. You're caught up in chemistry and not character, right? So the character flaws that your fiancés exhibiting weren't they just didn't magically show up. They were always there, especially when it comes to money, right? So if you're a person who was bad with money and your fiance is good with money, they didn't get into a relationship and start being bad with money. They were always bad with money. It just happens to show up now, right? So what do we do about that? Simple. I want to spend my Saturdays making you guys comfortable with the conversation of money, talking about money, asking questions about money from about yourself and your fiance or the person you're dating or whomever you're getting to know, because it doesn't matter if God, people were like, well, if you want a spouse, God is not going to drop him at your doorstep. Listen, I don't care if God promised you a spouse and he's going to drop him off through your chimney on Christmas Day. I don't care if, how God brings you your spouse. You're going to have to talk to this person. You're going to have to vet them. You're going to have to ask them questions. And the questions I'm going to give you today are designed, because you got to remember, a question is designed to extract important information from that person for your benefit, right? For you to have information about that person. So these 5 questions I'm going to give you, and maybe 6 questions I'm going to give you, are all about extracting that information because you're going to need it. You're going to want to know the character of the person you're dating when it comes to marriage, right? We think because someone said they believe in God, they must be a Christian. And reality is there are 1,000 religions on the planet and all have 1,000 gods attached to them. And you want to make sure that they're talking about the true and the living God and not Buddha. Let's be honest, right? You want to make sure that you and your partner are financially compatible. You know, you know, are you two spenders or are you two savers? And if y'all both are savers, which one is the more extreme of the two? Do y'all have I think I spelled okay. I think I spelled finances wrong. Okay. I've been up all morning. So sorry, I made anyway. So yeah, I spelled finances wrong. Oh my lord. Okay. I can go back and edit it. It's fine. So when you think about this thing, right? When you think about money and you think about finances, right? You have to think of it in terms of you're establishing a lifelong partner. Can this partner grow with you? Can this partner, you have an idea about one thing and they have an idea about another thing. Can y'all find the common ground? Is there financial compatibility? Things like that, right? So you kind of wonder, um, you kind of want to do that. So these are some of the questions that I have chosen for these top questions, simply because um, I chose these 5 questions. So we're going to talk about some 5 questions that you can ask even without asking about money, because the financial questions are more about what's on your job, right? You know, what you do for a living and what's your credit score. Financial questions are more than that. Financial questions are more than, you know, how you have you filed for bankruptcy. Like, you want to get into the deep parts of that person to figure out what kind of character they have when it comes to money, because this is saying money doesn't change. People think that money changes you. Money doesn't change you. It magnifies who you really are. And you want to get to know the person whom you're talking to or dating or engaged to, who they are financially, as well as in every other area of your life. What kind of mother they're going to be, what kind of father they're going to be, what kind of mother they are now if they have children, what kind of father are they now because they have children, what are they talking to their children about, What are they showing their children? What kind of parenting style they have? Is it compatible to your parenting style? If you're going to have blended family, it's a lot of stuff that has to be talked about. So this is the conversation, right? So let's get into it. So you're going to learn how to talk about money without talking about money. And remember, when asking a question, the object of the question is to to get information from them and get important information for yourself so you can process. But there is a skill set when you're asking these questions. There are two things you need to do when asking these questions. First of all, before you ask anybody these questions, you're probably going to want to ask these questions yourself. Ask yourself these questions. Why is it important for you to ask these questions? Because if you're talking to someone and you ask them this question and they say, well, what about you? You're going to have a response, right? That's number one. But the bigger reason you need to ask yourself these questions because you need to ask yourself, what do you think about these things for yourself? So you have a guide. So you can have like, what is it called? Like a guide to knowing how do I want to say this? A gauge. You have a gauge for your own self because believe it or not, when they're shooting questions back at you, they're doing the exact same thing, extracting information from you, right? And information, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a secure I work at I'm an engineer at AT&T, right? For example. Ching ching. They think you make bank, but you be making bank and be bankrupt. They don't know that. Or what's your credit score? I'll have an 800 credit score, but you may have an 800 credit score and you may have your low utilization, but you have a spending problem. When you get angry, you like to spend money and rack up your credit card bill. Or you may just got out of debt and just got that 800 thing, but you've been in debt for years because you didn't have the discipline to discipline yourself for that thing. These are the things that you want to know, but these are things that are not going to come out when you say, oh, tell me your credit history. It's not going to come out that way, because somebody's not going to be, oh, this is what I did for credit, blah, blah, blah. But you want to know the character of the person, the financial character of the person you're dealing with. Do they have financial integrity and how does it show up in your life? Because people will cheat on their income tax and think it's okay. Where are the fruits of the spirit when it comes to, and I'm talking for kingdom marriages. I'm not talking about for anybody getting married. I'm talking about people who are in the kingdom of God, who serve the living God, Jesus Christ, and they want to have a marriage that is strong. They have to be on the same page. All right. So with that being said, let's talk about these 5 questions and why they are important. Because if you desire marriage, this conversation for you, because you're going to have to talk about money. And I'm not talking about you got to talk about it every day of the week. I'm talking about, but you need to talk about it. You need to have a conversation. Even in your dating life, you have to have a conversation. And remember, when asking these questions, you have to be able to respond well. And 2 things, you have to respond well, but you also have to be a great listener, which is a skill a lot of us don't have. And being a great listener requires you to listen with your ears and listen with your eyes, right? What do I mean by listen with your ears and listen with your eyes? When someone is responding to you in a question, that means you take the time, you take 30 seconds, you digest what they say, because this is what we do in a conversation. Somebody will be talking to us and we'll already have the answer formulated in our head. I do it. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't, but we do. But a good listening skill is to be able to take what they said, digest it, and reverberate back to them with another question, right? So for example, when I coach clients, I sit there because what you're doing is you're making them feel heard. And by doing that, makes them feel like that you matter, that they matter to you, that you've taken the time to listen to what they had to say. You've digested it, and now you're giving it back to them. And well, tell me more about that. What does that look like for you? So, like I said, when I coach my clients, I take what they say, I listen. I try not to because my mind is already formulating thoughts, but I try not to respond, digest what they're saying, and then give it back to them. And they're like, oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I'd like for my clients to feel like they're heard, right? And you want to make sure that you are feeling like you want to make sure that the person you're asking these questions to are felt like they're heard. That's point number one. Point number two is that you have to see their response, right? When you're asking questions about money and finances, people are couldn't be uncomfortable about talking about it, right? So they may shift their body weight. They may, avoid the question altogether, or deflect from it, or talk about something else. Those are things to take note of. Are they red flags? I don't know, because I don't know you personally. I wouldn't consider them to be red flags, but it's something to take note of. And that you may have to bring it up in another time, in another space. And if they deflect, then I would consider it to be a red flag, right? Or did they think, or are they thoughtful enough to think about what you said and then respond, right? That means they pondered your question, they took it in, they dissected it, they were listening, they pondered it, they dissected, they took the time to listen, and now they're giving you their response. Those are the things you're looking for. So you have to see with your eyes and also with your ears. So with that being said, let's go into this my top five questions. So my first question is, and I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to always tell you what the question is and why it's important. So tell me your thoughts of God and money, right? This is a very loaded question, so I probably will have to break it down into two questions. And first of all, because you need to know what God they're serving, right? And this question will help you discern what God they're serving, because a lot of people will say they believe in God and not Christ. A lot of people will say, oh, God and money don't mix. Some people may say God and, you know, I think I'm going to change the question to do you think God should be involved in your financial life? How about that? How about we change the question? I don't like this. I gotta think about it. Um, I'm going to change the question. Yeah, I can do that because this is my life. I can do that. Okay, I'm changing the first question. This will help. This will be better. Save. I'm going to show it. Question number one: do you believe that it is important to have God in your financial life? Right? Most people will say, oh, yeah, it's important. Then the second question you would ask, or the follow-up question, was the follow-up question. Some people are most generally, everybody's going to say, yes, I believe it's important to have God in my financial life, right? That's true. Most people will say that. They're not what they're gonna say, no. My money is my money. Me and God is here, but me and my money are different. You may have somebody say that. And that could probably very well possibly be true, right? But the reason why you want to ask this question, because it will speak to their belief system. And how you go deeper on this question is, give me what is an example of um what is it, show me, can you give me an example of how this is important to you in your financial life, right? And they'll give you an example. So if someone was to ask me this question, I would simply tell them, well, at some point I decided, at one point in my life, I decided that I wanted God to be actively involved in my financial life, right? I wanted his input, I wanted his value, I wanted his wisdom. So I asked him to be a part of that part of my life. A lot of times what you'll find is the people will say yes, they want God in their financial life, but the reality is God is so far away from their financial life. Like, it's like God can come in every area of their life but except their money. And if you were like in, and if you are building a future, and you're building kingdom future and kingdom legacy, you're going to want God to be a part of your life. So you have to ask yourself this question: how important it is for you to have God in your own financial life, right? And when I talk about financial life, I'm not talking about just the money in the checkbook and the bank accounts. What I'm talking about is your soul. How much does he govern your soul when it comes to money? How much healing have you gone through personally when it comes to the issues that are affecting your money? Because everything that affects your money isn't about money. Your soul, your heart, mind, will, and emotions play a huge part in how you perceive money in your own life, right? So how important is it for you to have God in the mix of your financial life, helping you make financial decisions, guiding your direction? How much wisdom have you garnished from God over the last 5 years or last 3 years from God to help you move in a certain financial direction? Have you experienced financial freedom in terms of not being emotionally tied to money, or are you moved by every stroke of wind that comes along that tarps and turvies you upside down, your life financially? How important was God in your financial life over these last 2 years during COVID? Is a good question. Why is that a great question? Because a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people had to cut back. A lot of people had to work from home. A lot of people had to do a lot of different things with their finances and become creative. And they had to become creative, but did they get their wisdom from God, or did they panic, or did they, go into fear? What did that look like for them? Right. And what did that look like for you? So that's question number one. That's why I changed the question. It was too simplistic, but this one's a little bit better. So question number two. What is your financial vision for your future? What is your plan to achieve it? Right? This speaks to goals. Right? You can say, okay, so you can say something to the effect, well, what was your goals for the last 5 years, and what did you do to achieve them, and have you achieved them? Right? Or to that effect. Or what is your financial vision for your future, and how do you plan to achieve it? Because that speaks to their goals. That means they have a plan in mind. The worst thing a man can't have, or a woman shouldn't have, is a plan. Right? I got a plan. I know exactly what I want to do in the next year financially and overall in my life, not just financially, right? Like, you can ask them, what are your personal achievement goals? What do you want to acquire for yourself personally? Where do you want to grow and develop personally? Where do you want to grow, develop financially in your financial life? Where do you see yourself where were you 5 years ago financially, and how did you overcome those things? What were your goals financially 5 years ago, and how did you achieve those goals, or have you achieved those goals? Because having goals in a relationship denotes that you have a plan. And if you have a plan, then if you have an idea, you have a plan. If you have a plan, you're going to execute that plan, right? So having goals is important. That's question number two. Question number three is all about legacy. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? What do you want your future generations to know about you, right? And these are questions that you got to ask yourself first before you should ask anybody else. And I say that because if you can't answer them for yourself, when someone is asking you these questions, you're going to be like, why are you asking me questions that you don't even know the answer to yourself? So you got to kind of know the answer to these questions. What kind of legacy do you want to build and leave behind? My goal is to, what do I want future? I tell people all the time, I want my legacy to be so long, for 1,000 generations, that I'll never know that because they had someone in their bloodline that prayed and went before the throne of God, and they did this and they did that, that God would honor them. And that the blessings of the Lord make it one rich and added no sorrow. So that they will understand that the wealth that's been generated was generated because one woman got before their face and decided to honor God and be with God. And this is the result of it. God promised David a legacy, and the legacy is true because that legacy came through Jesus. He said someone will always sit on the throne of David, and that is true. But God honored the promise in a different way. He didn't honor the promise in a natural sense. He honored the promise in a spiritual sense, because Jesus does sit on the throne of David, and there will always be an heir, and because he was part of David's lineage. If you look at Jesus's history, he's part of the lineage, and there is a king that sits on the throne of David. without end. So I want it to be known 1,000 generations from now that, when they, because I'm a history buff and I'm a genealogy buff, and I like to look back at my history, that when they go back and they can see back, because the way genetics is working right now, you can go back a while. I'm like fifth, sixth cousins in my DNA history, because I did my DNA. So I did my DNA history, and I have cousins. I guess fifth and sixth cousins, right? So when you go back, I'm pretty sure by the time 1,000 generations come by again, you know what I'm saying? They're going to be able to pinpoint the point where this woman right here, she got on her knee and she got before the Lord of God Almighty, and she blessed the Lord. And because she did what she was honored to do and she was obedient to God, this is the legacy that we have today. That my kids will begin to talk about my legacy, and my kids will talk to their kids about my legacy, and so forth and so on. It will be passed down. So that is what I want them to know, that because of all what one person did, this is why we live the way we live. Because by the same token, no, I'm not going to talk about that. That's for another time. That's for Money Mindset Monday. That's for Money Mindset Monday, not for this, right? So that's my third question. What kind of legacy do you want to build and leave? What do you want future generations? I want to build a legacy of love and solid marriages, right? I want my children to see a good, godly, kingly marriage set in the kingdom with two parents who love each other, that they can emulate and pass on for 1,000 generations, because the blessing of the Lord lasts for thousands of generations. You know what I'm saying? Where the focus was about building legacy and making sure that we were well taken care of. They honored God and everything that they did, even in their money, things like that. But these are questions that you have to answer for yourself first, and then be able to ask someone else. Okay. So question number 4 is this: what did your parents teach you about money? And most people will tell you, my parents didn't teach me anything about money, because they think that this question means, um like, how do I want to say this? That meant that they sat down and had conversations about what they wanted their children to know. That's what I mean, right? Okay, so how does that look? What does that look like? Looks like, they came around every Saturday morning and they talked about the household budget and what they're going to do and so forth and so on. But that question is deeper. And because that question is deeper simply because they can say, oh, well, my first memory about money, or what my parents taught me about money, is that I had to hide my money because my parents stole it because they were drug addicts, or that my parents promised me, they would take my money from me and told me they would give it back to me and never got it back. Things like that. Because these speak to deeper issues. These speak to issues that you're going to want to know, simply because they're going to show up in your marriage, right? But you also got to go deeper and ask yourself, what did your parents teach you about money? Right? Some of y'all parents taught y'all that struggling is the way of life. So that's the way you live. You struggle financially. You can make six figures, but it's not good enough, because you can make six figures and still struggle. And you were taught that the struggle life is real, and that in order for you to be successful, you got to struggle. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's no life of ease. There is no life of rest. There's ease because you always got to be struggling, right? The struggle you can make. I find it amazing how people can make six figures and still struggle, because they were taught to struggle, because the struggle life is real. So that's what your parents taught you, to struggle. They taught you to survive. You can by asking the right questions, you can honestly see if a person is living in survival mode or they're living in thriving mode. And I talk about, and I'll probably, and on Money Mindset Mondays, I'll be talking about survival mode. For years, we live in this, we talk about keeping our head above water and treading water in survival mode, just doing barely enough to stay alive, survival mode. And you'll find that a lot of people that you're dating live in survival mode. They have no peace, but that came from somewhere, right? And where did it come from? It come from what their parents didn't teach them about money. It comes from what they observed and they learned. It's not about the fact that your parents sat down and gave you a budget and then y'all did the budget, family budget every week. That's every month. That's not that. It's their behaviors and their patterns that you picked up on. So I should change the question. What behavior patterns did your parents teach you about money? Right? Because it's important. They're going to emulate that. Now, my fifth and final question, I'll choose this one because I had two, but I think I'm gonna choose this one. What was the worst thing you did for money and why? What was the worst thing you did for money and why? Right. I have other questions and I'll probably share at some point. Because what was the worst thing? Because let's be honest, when we were younger, and if you I when we I'm older, I'll say that. I'm over 50, so my memory is a little longer. So there were some things. When I was a kid, I did some things, but the worst thing I've ever done, I don't think I've even I can like it's a thought question for me because I had to really what's the worst thing I did for money and why did I do it? And to me, the worst thing may be very different for someone else. Someone will be like, well, I stole money because I had to feed my family, right? But that's not who I am now, right? Or, um, you know, and this is a question that speaks to integrity. It actually speaks to integrity. What kind of financial integrity do they have? What kind of financial character do they have? Do they have, or did they had then, and do they have it now? Right? And why did they do it? Because a lot of people, I remember, um, okay, so I live here in LA, and I've realized that some of the people here in LA, they live a gangster lifestyle, right? Because LA is known for gangs, and they live the gangster lifestyle. So they have done things in their past that are quite interesting. I'll say that. The people I've met, they've done things that are quite interesting. But that's not who they were. That's not who they are today, right? But you kind of want to know what's in the background, what can creep up on you, what can be, you know, um, could be affecting their mindset, so to speak. So you kind of want to know these things. Like I've heard some stories from some gentlemen here that I've met. Um, and talking with them about their past and things like that. But what was the worst thing they did for money? And it's like, because I didn't grow up that way, right? So I didn't grow up in a gangster. I didn't grow up in gangs. I lived in the suburbs of New Jersey, and there were probably gangs. I didn't know about it because I didn't do it. So the worst thing I've ever done, for money was steal a peach, a plum. I never forget. I stole a plum at 12, and my mother spanked me, and I never stole anything else again. You know what I'm saying? As compared to, you know, some of the other stories I've heard where they were stick up kids and they stole, and these things like that. And the reason why you ask these questions is because these things open up door. Sometimes, you know, maybe I'll do that. I'll do the I'll do the spiritual aspect of money on another day. It's too deep to do today, and I'm not ready for that. So you kind of want to know what they did in the past with money, right? How do they handle money? How do they handle situations? How do they handle pressure? Was they a stick up kid? And do you want to be involved with a man that was a stick up kid 20 years ago? And is he a stick up kid now? Does he carry that mentality? Because that life, I wasn't in street life like my brothers were, my uncles and stuff like that. I wasn't in street life, right? But that mentality of street life carries on, whether you're in the street or not, right? So that my suburban, sheltered life, shelterish life I had, carries on because I've given my children that mindset or that lifestyle. You know, do they believe that everything is again, like everything is a struggle, and so they had to they had to do what they had to do to survive, and are they still living and doing what I have to do survival mode? You see what I'm saying? Because there's a difference between waking up one morning and maturing. There's a difference between what you did when you were 20 and what you do when you're 40. And is there a maturing in their attitudes about how they get money? Is there maturing about how they get money and why they're doing what they're doing? Or are they still a 40-year-old stick-up kid? Or they still carry the mentality of a 20-year-old stick-up kid, even though they're 40? Are they carrying that immaturity? Well, I'm just doing this to be doing it, but things like that. I'm just doing it because I'm used to doing this is all I've ever done. Right. And you're like, and I know those they could be extremes. They not could not be extremes. Someone being a stick-up kid. That's not my job to judge. That is your job to figure out why you're dating. But you have to also ask yourself, what is the worst thing you did for money and why? I said, because your past isn't exactly squeaky clean either. You may have, I knew girls who grew up and they were on drugs and they had to sell themselves for drugs, right? Is that the worst thing you've done for money? I don't know. You had to get baby, what is the worst thing you've done for money and why? Have you had to sell yourself to get dollars because you had to feed your baby or whatever there was a season in your life where you were so low that you did X, Y, and Z because you needed to keep a roof over your kid's head. Stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Or you stayed in abusive relationship because you had no way out because the man was controlling everything. So so you stayed in an abusive relationship for money. That's the worst thing. That's the worst thing for some people. So because you were cut off and you couldn't go anywhere and he held all the purse strings and so forth and so on. But the thing about it is you have to be honest with yourself first before you can be vulnerable enough to spill that out to someone else, right? Because when and when we're dating, we like to put our best foot forward, and I understand that. And but the reality is at some point in time, especially if you're kingdom marriage and kingdom minded, you're going to have to bear your soul a little bit more. Why? Because if you're doing kingdom marriage right, and if you're doing kingdom marriage by the king, he's going to want you to bear your soul. So if there's necessary for healing to become taking place, healing can take place. So that way you two can be better people, right? So you can be whole before your king. Because what'll happen is when you get married, God doesn't look at you and him separately. He look at you, him as one. And whatever he does, you're responsible for, and whatever you do, he responsible for. Vice, you know what I mean? So I don't know if I'm talking to men or women, but you understand, you become responsible for each other, and God looks at you as one. So if he opened the door to say, I don't know, there's a open door in him that is affecting your money when you get married, that open door is going to affect your marriage and your money, and you're going to have to deal with it, and you might as well deal with it now before you get married, so that way when you're in your marriage you can deal with it together as one. I hope that makes sense. So you will be quite surprised how many open doors people leave open doors with, have open doors in their life that the enemy run amok in, right? That the enemy runs amok in. So that the enemy runs amok in. So yeah. So that's it. So I want to thank everybody for watching. My broadcast of Finances and Fiancés. If you like the broadcast, leave me a comment, hit the like and subscribe button here on Facebook. On YouTube channel, and join me again next Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for another episode of Finances and Fiancés, preparing your money for marriage. I'm not sure what the topic's going to be, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a good one. So I'm out of here. I love you. And if you would like to know more about me as a financial coach, why don't you visit my website at www.serenenunes.com, and you can learn all about all the transformative financial coaching programs I have available to transform your life. Hey, Benita, thank you for watching, girl. I'm done. But thank you for watching. You can rewatch the broadcast. These questions are really interesting, especially if you're starting to date or want to date, or you think God is going to drop a man down your chimney on Christmas morning. You still got to talk to him. So I want y'all to be comfortable with the conversation of money. So I love you all, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Finances and Fiancés are going to strictly be on YouTube. I am not doing anything else with this one. I'm not putting it on Facebook. I'm going to strictly be on YouTube. So share it, like it, subscribe, get notifications to let me know that you are down to see this. So I love you all, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.